Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. And on this edition, we are going to be doing a recap of sorts, as we are going to be doing our season recap for your AHL affiliate of the Henderson Silver Knights. And it's going to be a really interesting situation because this is going to be a video where we're going to be talking about, and we're really going to be looking at and seeing how the Henderson Silver Knights did in this past season. So this is going to be a really good episode here on Vegas Hockey Hub on PR Connections Radio, and something that we've been wanting to talk about for a while, but we wanted the season to be over. So that's why we've been waiting a little bit. Now that it is the beginning of the month, that is why we are getting to this point now in time. Now, before we break down the Henderson Silver Knights and give you our season recap, we are going to be talking about PRConnectionsRadio.com. Go to the website and check out all the fantastic content we have on the network. We have about a dozen shows on the platform, including Vegas Hockey Hub. So my advice would be to have you go to the website, www.prconnectionsradio, and check out all the amazing content that we have on the network. And then we also are going to end up having go to our social medias as well. We are also on all social media platforms at Vegas Hockey Hub. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are everywhere at Vegas Hockey Hub. So, to everybody who's watching all around the world, this definitely is going to be a fun episode, and we're going to be breaking down, like I said, the 2023-2024 season recap here on Vegas Hockey Hub. So, to really get into this, we're going to go all the way back to October, where the season began, as your Henderson Silver Knights would be on the road to begin the year, taking on the Iowa Wild in a 2-game series. And on opening night, your Henderson Silver Knights would beat the Iowa Wild 4-2. And this was a really interesting matchup on opening night, because this was a Henderson Silver Knights team that had a kind of a combination of young talent and veterans. You had some veterans like Jake Bischoff, Adam Cracknell. Then you had some young guys as well, like Brennan Bryson and Lucas Cormier, who are really kind of establishing themselves with the Henderson Silver Knights. So after the first game of the season, they win 4-2. They are 1-0 on the season. Game 2 would be against the Iowa Wild the day afterwards, and the Henderson Silver Knights would go on a tear in terms of goaltending, as not only would the Henderson Silver Knights win this game, but the Vegas Golden Knights affiliate would score a touchdown against the Iowa Wild, as it would be a 7-3 game for your Henderson Silver Knights. So after that explosive outing and having a 2-0 start to the season, your Henderson Silver Knights would be at home at the Dollar Loan Center to start out the year on October 20th, as they would have a 2-game series against the San Jose Barracuda, the affiliate of the San Jose Sharks. And amazingly, with the Henderson Silver Knights, they would continue their winning streak, and they would win back-to-back games to start out the season 4-0, sweeping the San Jose Barracudas 5-1 in the first matchup, and then finishing it out with a 4-3 overtime win to go to 4-0 on the season for your Henderson Silver Knights. So after the first week being 4-0, they would start a road stand and go on a 1-game road trip to Bakersfield, California, and take on the Bakersfield Condors, the affiliate of the Edmonton Oilers. Unfortunately, for your Henderson Silver Knights, they would end up getting their first loss of the season. It'd be a 5-1 loss on October 24th. And then the next day, on October 25th, you would drive a little bit to San Jose to see the San Jose Barracudas for the first time on the road. And your Henderson Silver Knights would manage to do something really good, and they would win in overtime for the second time in a row against San Jose. It'd be a 4-3 matchup, just like it was at the Dollar Loan Center the week before. And just like that, your Henderson Silver Knights started out the young season 5-1 on the calendar year. But this would actually be the high point for the Henderson Silver Knights, as they would actually have a 2-game homestand on the end of October, as they would lose to the Ontario Reign 4-1 on the 27th of October, and then 2 days later would pick up a victory against San Diego. It'd be a 4-2 win for the Henderson Silver Knights. So for your Henderson Silver Knights, they would start the season 6-2. Like, just think about that for a minute. The first 8 games of the season in the AHL, your Henderson Silver Knights would start out the year 6-2. Well, would this continue? Would they end up building that momentum as they started a 2-game road stand against the Abbotsford Canucks, the affiliate of the Vancouver Canucks? Well, on November 3rd, the first game of the month, Henderson would win 5-2 and become a 7-2 record in the AHL. But that unfortunately would be followed up by a shutout as the Abbotsford Canucks would score 2 and your Henderson Silver Knights would score 0, and they would lose that game in the final of that 2-game road stand against Abbotsford. Now, a few days later, they would travel to Colorado to take on the Colorado Eagles, the affiliate of the Colorado Avalanche. And unfortunately, they'd lose the first matchup 5-1, but then they would rebound and win on 5-4 in overtime to beat the Colorado Eagles. So just like that, right? Just like that, your Henderson Silver Knights, they ended up being 8-4 in the first 12 games of the year. Like, the first dozen games of the year, almost the first month in, your Henderson Silver Knights looked like an amazing team. It seemed like they really were developing. You saw progress from players like Gregory Diansenko. You saw progress from guys like Brennan Bryson. There was some solid momentum coming from your Henderson Silver Knights in the first dozen games of the year. And following a Coachella Valley win on November 15th, that means that in the first month of the season, the first dozen games of the year, your Henderson Silver Knights would be 9-4 to begin the season. And it just really showed you that when it came to the Henderson Silver Knights and when it came to the organization itself, they were really building on that momentum. They were really showing that they've been making some progress in the AHL as the affiliate of the Vegas Golden Knights, who were the Stanley Cup champion in the NHL. So there was, the AHL affiliate being right there. Now, the rest of November was a kind of weird up and down situation with your Henderson Silver Knights, as not only would they lose back-to-back games to the Abbotsford Canucks in overtime, by the way. It was a 3-2 matchup on November 17th, and then a 3-2 loss on November 18th. So back-to-back losses in overtime to the Abbotsford Canucks, and just like that, they would be 9-4-2, and then they would take on the Bakersfield Condors once again. They would lose in a shutout, so unfortunately, they would be 9-5-2, and then for your Henderson Silver Knights, they would lose in the first matchup against Tucson, the affiliate of the Arizona Coyotes, 3-2. So your Henderson Silver Knights going on a 4-game losing streak in the middle of November, and that would end up causing your Henderson Silver Knights to kind of fall a little bit when it came to what they were trying to do in the standings. But you have to keep this in mind. The end of November, they get an overtime win against the Tucson Roadrunners. That'd be a 3-2 overtime win. And just like that, the Silver Knights had kind of built up some momentum, winning games at the Dollar Loan Center. It seemed like your Henderson Silver Knights were really starting to gel at this point in time. But unfortunately for your Silver Knights, December would hit. Unfortunately, when December hit, your Henderson Silver Knights went on a skid, and my, oh my, what a skid this was. Now, to start this out, they would lose in a shootout to the Bakersfield Condors 4-3, and then they would lose back-to-back games to the Calgary Wranglers 2-1 and 7-4. So just like that, you lose 3 games in a row around there to start the month of December. Then they would be on the road for a 5-game road trip in California. That would be to Ontario, San Jose, and San Diego. Now, the good news for Henderson is they did win some games on this road trip, But they also started out by losing the first two on this road trip. As on December 6th, they would lose 3-1 to Ontario, and then they would have a terrible outing on December 8th, losing 6-1 to San Jose. Now, when it came to the Henderson Silver Knights itself, they would end up getting 3 wins in a row, as on December 9th, they'd pick up a 5-1 win to avenge the 6-1 loss they did the night before. And then in Ontario would win in overtime on December 13th, 3-2. But just like that, you win 2 games in a row. And then the last game of the California road trip, they would end up with an impressive 3-1 victory. Now, getting back to Henderson, getting back to the Dollar Loan Center for the 3-game trip, they would actually win 5-1 against Coachella Valley. So that would be a 4-game winning streak towards the middle of December. But unfortunately for the Silver Knights, this would not last on the 4-game winning streak, as on December 22nd, they would lose a crushing 2-1 loss to San Jose before closing it out on December 23rd before Christmas time with a 3-2 victory. So towards the middle of December, you're seeing a Henderson Silver Knights team that they're kind of near 500. They're not underneath it yet, but they're around 500. They've had some impressive wins. They've had some overtime wins. They've also had some really good dominating wins, like a 5-1, 6-2, 7-3 matchup, that kind of thing. Your Henderson Silver Knights were picking up some good momentum, and you did have some solid progress from players like Gregory Diancinco, Sheldon Rempel. You also had players like Byron Fraze, Gage Quinney, Brennan Bryson. You saw the development of some players on the Henderson Silver Knights as the time was going on. So how did the Henderson Silver Knights do once 2024 hit, you might ask? How did the Henderson Silver Knights perform once you had to turn the calendar year over? Well, they would start out with a 6-3 win against San Diego to start out the calendar year before losing a very unfortunate 6 games in a row. That's right. They would lose 6 games in a row. They would start out with a 5-1 loss to Calgary on January 5th, then a 1-0 loss and a shutout in overtime to Calgary on January 6th. Then you would have a back-to-back situation against the Milwaukee Admirals, who is an opponent that you don't see that often, but they would lose both matchups 7-0 and 2-0 in that time period. And unfortunately for them, they would close this out with a crushing 5-2 loss to the Coachella Valley Firebirds, who are the affiliate of the Seattle Kraken. Now, after a near half a month of just losing and losing and losing, the Henderson Silver Knights would stop the bleeding of sorts, as on January 17th, you would have a 6-4 victory against Coachella Valley, which would then be followed up by a victory in Tucson, a 4-2 victory 2 days later. So after you had a bunch of losses in a row, you did rebound a bit by winning 2 games back-to-back. The bad news is, for your Henderson Silver Knights, is that they would end up with another losing streak, as after winning 2 games in a row, they would have a 4-game losing streak. As against the Tucson Roadrunners, it'd be a 3-2 loss on January 20th. They have a 4-3 loss against Coachella Valley on January 24th. And then in back-to-back games against the Colorado Eagles, they would lose in overtime back-to-back games, as it'd be a 3-2 loss on January 26th and then a 4-3 loss on January 27th. So to really end the month of January, to say that it was abysmal would be an understatement. To say that the Henderson Silver Knights only winning 4 games in a month of January is alarming. Like, considering what they did to begin the year, the fact that they went 8-4 in the first 12 games of the year, the fact that the Henderson Silver Knights started out 4-0 in the AHL, they looked like they were riding a big high, just like the Vegas Golden Knights were riding a big high. So, for your Henderson Silver Knights, it was very unfortunate, and I felt like it was kind of depleting a bit, the fact that your Henderson Silver Knights picked up that big of a losing streak, not once, but twice, of having a losing streak of 4 games or more during the season. Moving over to the month of February, as we're doing our season recap here on the Henderson Silver Knights, and on February 2nd, they would start a series against the Iowa Wild, conveniently the team they started out the season against, and they would actually split this matchup, as they would have a very good 8-1 win on February 2nd before having a very tough 3-2 loss on February 3rd. What would follow is another long road trip, as your Henderson Silver Knights would be on a 6-game road stand in the middle of February, as they would actually go to Ontario, Coachella Valley, San Diego, and Colorado during this time period. So, how did your Vegas Golden Knights do, or how did your Henderson Silver Knights do on the road, you might ask? Well, it was mixed results. So, they started out against the Ontario region, and they'd pick up a 4-3 victory in overtime. So that'd be a very good situation there. A 4-3 win over the Ontario Reign to begin the month of February. Then they would have back-to-back games against Coachella Valley. That would not go well for the Vegas Golden Knights AHL affiliate, as they would lose to Seattle Kraken's AHL affiliate 4-0 and 6-1 in back-to-back games. Now, after leaving Coachella Valley, they would go a little bit down and they would go to San Diego and would have a 2-1 win for the Henderson Silver Knights. So after having a back-to-back loss, they pick that up and they have a victory against San Diego. And then you would finish out that 6-game road stand and have the last 2 games in the month of February against the Colorado Eagles. And to put it in football terms, the Denver Broncos beat the Las Vegas Raiders 6-0 in these 2 games, okay? The Henderson Silver Knights did not pick up a goal in back-to-back games against the Colorado Eagles. That was a very bad way to finish the month of February. And if you really want to look at it and really examine what they did in February, they only won 3 games in that month. So that was definitely a bad situation where, once again, in the month of February, you finished below 500. Like I said, you only won about 4 games in January. You only won 3 games in February. And it was just an unfortunate situation where your Henderson Silver Knights were just not picking up wins, despite having 2 All-Stars in the AHL All-Star game in Adam Cracknell and Gregory Diansenko. So, moving over from February and getting into March of this year, the Henderson Silver Knights, they would actually have a very busy schedule in the month of March, as you would have a dozen games being played in this time period. They would take on the Tucson Roadrunners, the Bakersfield Condors, the Abbotsford Canucks. You'd play the Milwaukee Admirals and the Coachella Valley Firebirds, the Coachella Valley Firebirds. So you would have a very tough schedule in the month of March. So how did Henderson do in March? How did your Henderson Silver Knights perform in this month, you might ask? Well, they would start out a 2-game stand against the Tucson Roadrunners. This would be at home at the Dollar Loan Center here in Henderson. And it would be a 4-3 win against the Tucson Roadrunners. That'd be a good victory, picking up momentum and kind of helping that self-esteem after suffering so many losses on that road trip where you had the California and Colorado road trip they just went on previously. Getting back home on a 5-game homestand, winning against Tucson in overtime, that was a good start there. Now, the bad news for Henderson is that the next 2 games at home, they would lose a 5-2 affair on a Saturday against the Tucson Roadrunners, and then the Bakersfield Condors would come to Henderson, and on March 6th would win a 4-0 shutout, and the Silver Knights, for unfortunately the 6th time that season, would be shut out, and that'd be at home against Bakersfield. The next series would be on March 8th and March 9th. It'd be a 2-game series against the Abbotsford Canucks, the affiliate of the Vancouver Canucks. And after picking up a 4-2 win on Friday for the 7th time this season, they would be shut out as they would lose a 6-0 affair on Saturday. So in 2 out of 3 games at home at the Dollar Loan Center, the Henderson Silver Knights would be shut out and would let up 10 goals during that time period. Really shows you that the goaltending was weak at times, but considering the defense and considering the AHL part of it, I can't sit here and be overly critical about that situation. Now, the remainder of March is interesting for your Henderson Silver Knights, as after being on a 5-game homestand, they would start a 6-game road trip where they would go to Tucson, Abbotsford, and Milwaukee. So that's a good amount of traveling right there. And they would start the 6-game road trip with a 4-0 loss. So the 3rd out of 4 games where your Henderson Silver Knights would not get a goal in the back of the net, they lose 4-0 in Tucson. And then the next game on March 13th, the Tucson Roadrunners would win 6-2 in a very lopsided loss. So for your Henderson Silver Knights, you lose 3 games in a row. You lose 5 of your last 6 games. And it was really a bad story for the Henderson Silver Knights. Looking at what they did in 2023, 2024, after having such a hot start to the year, after having such an incredible momentum in October and the beginning of November, to really see what happened to Henderson in December, most importantly, January, and then you saw the fall off kind of continue in February and March. It was just an unfortunate set of circumstances for your Vegas Golden Knights AHL affiliate out there in Henderson. Now, the remaining 4 games on that road trip, Abbotsford Canucks, the Henderson Silver Knights would stop the losing streak, and they'd pick up a very crucial win for them, as on March 16th, they would win a 7-3 matchup, one of their best matchups they've had in about a month and a half in terms of goal scoring, but it would not matter, unfortunately, as the Henderson Silver Knights would let up 8 goals the next night against Abbotsford and would lose 8-3. And I hate to say this because it's going to be overly critical, but this is the reoccurring theme of the Silver Knights in 2023, 2024. That they would have, a very impressive 6-2 victory, and then the next night they would lose 7-4. Just a very lopsided, kind of an uneven 50-50 situation, what it felt like in the last month and a half for your Henderson Silver Knights. And then they would go to Milwaukee on a 2-game road stand, and man, oh man, this was just not a good look for the Silver Knights, as on March 23rd, they would have a 2-1 overtime loss, and then they would get shut out again as they would lose 3-0 on the final game of this road stand on March 24th. So for the Henderson Silver Knights, this is just a situation where you're picking up on a theme here, that regardless of individual stats, which you will go over in a little bit, they just kept losing, but it wasn't like a 4-3 loss, a 3-2 loss. No, they were like 4-0 or 6-1. Like, these were losses where, unfortunately, the offense wasn't putting the puck in the back of the net. The defense wasn't really standing in front of the net and helping out the goaltender. And the goaltending was kind of left exposed at times due to the AHL. Now, I will point out this disclaimer. Okay? The last 3 games, the Henderson Silver Knights picked up a 4-2 victory against the Bakersfield Condors. And that was at home. That was here in Henderson. And then you would end up having a 3-2 loss against Coachella Valley. And then you would have a 5-4 overtime loss against the Ontario Reign. So for the Henderson Silver Knights, the fact that when you look at this season, unfortunately for them, they ended the season on a loss with the Henderson Silver Knights, kind of wraps up what they did this season. And I'm not going to go over the standings. I'm not going to do any of that because, let's be honest, it is the American Hockey League. There is not a lot of stuff to really talk about in terms of standings. It's more about the stats. It's more about what the players are doing at this point in time. So when you see the standings and everything that happened there, you know what? Henderson Silver Knights, you didn't see them make the playoffs. You didn't compete for the Calder Cup playoffs. I understand all of that. But the individual stat for your Henderson Silver Knights is very crucial, and that's actually the most important stat that we're going to go over right here, right now, as the Henderson Silver Knights did have some good players that did play this season, and one of the players that I am going to be spotlighting is AHL All-Star Gregory Diancenko, as he would have a 20-goal season and rack up 55 points on the season for your Henderson Silver Knights. Now, Diancenko, a former first-round pick by Florida a couple of years ago, he was a waiver claim by the Vegas Golden Knights. He even had a cup of coffee in the NHL this year due to injuries. But Diancenko, 20-goal season, an all-star for the Silver Knights. It also racked up about 50 penalty minutes on the year. Overall, Diancenko did a solid job this season and was a standout on this Silver Knights team. Despite the fact that they only won 28 games this season, the Silver Knights did have a kind of a spotlight in Diancenko. Now, two veterans on the roster who do have to be acknowledged. Tyler Benson had a 25-point season in his debut year with the Henderson Silver Knights. Now, Tyler Benson, who was with the Edmonton Oilers organization before signing a minor league contract with the Vegas Golden Knights this past offseason. Now, as a veteran presence, he did his job. He was a solid addition to the Silver Knights organization, and him getting 25 points, I will have to give him props there. And then the Vegas native, Gage Quinney, he racked up 28 points on the season in only 39 games. But Gage Quinney, the Vegas local, a guy who is beloved here in Las Vegas, he was also another bright spot on this season. Now, defensively, the best defenseman on this year has to go to Dyson Mayo. He racked up 5 goals, 25 points, and over 75 penalty minutes in 67 games this year. Now, Jake Bischoff, he did incredible as the captain of the Henderson Silver Knights. And then you had Lucas Cormier, who was the top prospect, or one of the top prospects, entering the year with your Henderson Silver Knights. 20 points in 58 games this season in Henderson. And he even had his NHL debut with the Vegas Golden Knights back in January. Now, some honorable mentions and some players that we are going to be kind of spotlighting a little bit. Former first-round pick Brendan Bryson had 19 goals and 19 assists, as long as 40 penalty minutes in about 50 games with the Silver Knights. So considering he didn't play the full year, he was back and forth between Vegas and Henderson for a little bit. But for a former first-round pick, he almost had a 20-goal season. So I have to say for Brendan Bryson, he did make progress this season. And the leading goal scorer for the Henderson Silver Knights, unfortunately, I don't know if he's going to be coming back next year, considering his off-season status. But Sheldon Rempel had a 27-goal season and racked up 45 points with the Henderson Silver Knights. So over the past 2 seasons, Sheldon Rempel has been a very good contributor as a bottom 6 forward in Vegas, and then being a solid player in the AHL in Henderson. Now, the goaltending is not going to be the greatest stat-wise, but I do have to mention them if I'm going to be fair. Now, in terms of all the goaltenders with the Henderson Silver Knights, the guy that led the Silver Knights in wins was Yuri Batara, as Yuri would actually have 11 wins on the season, lead everybody in that category. Now, Isaiah Seville, he did play a decent amount of games this season. In fact, he had well over 20 games played for the Silver Knights in net. Jesper Beckman, the former draft pick of the Vegas Golden Knights organization, he kind of made his debut in the AHL after being promoted from the ECHL. He had about 20 starts as well. So overall, Batera, Seville, and Beckman, they all had a huge amount of starts in Henderson this past season. And when it came to save percentage, you had Batara, he had the highest save percentage, and goals against average, that also went to Batera as well. So this was the season recap with the Henderson Silver Knights. Now, this past season, their win-loss record, unfortunately, they had 28 wins, 36 losses, and 8 overtime losses. So for your Henderson Silver Knights, them only rack up a certain amount of points this season. It's unfortunate to see. But in reality, the Henderson Silver Knights, this was just a season that just happened. So, your 2023-2024 season recap with your Henderson Silver Knights here on Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And until next time, continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.